Thank you to all the speakers. We will be holding a short Q&A. I'm going to pass it over to Goldie Steiner, and she's going to start the Q&A questions.
Okay. Well, we have more questions than we can possibly handle, and many ideas were presented, and I'm going to address one idea that that Hananya has raised: unity. How do we create unity when we're finding more and more dissension, even between the Jewish people? There's a huge divide. Here is a question from one of the audience. Why has the left-leaning Jewish establishment not responded to the disinformation Palestinian mythology with the truth of the San Remo resolution establishing the Jewish people's rights to the land of Israel and educated all, especially young people, who should know better and legitimize Israel instead of ignorantly playing into the hands of the anti-Semites, anti-Zionists? Could you respond to that question? And I will conclude with another question that is in connection with it. What should or could the government of Israel do to improve diaspora relations, specifically the growing divide? And I will add to that, when you talked about unity, how does that happen? And the first question that you missed was, why have the left-leaning Jewish establishment not responded to the disinformative Palestinian mythology with the truth of the San Remo resolution, establishing the Jewish people's rights to the land of Israel, and educated all, especially young people, about legitimizing Israel instead of ignorantly playing into the hands of the anti-Semites, anti-Zionists? Could you please elaborate on that?
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, so starting with the first question regarding the left playing into the hands of either the media or other international bodies, I think that, first of all, it is arguable. I think that some people might not agree with that. Some people might agree with that. But well, in my opinion, it is a problem. It is a fact that many in the left are being played. And I think that the answer is within the question. It's because they are being played. They don't know the facts. I was actually, throughout my years of advocating for Israel, I did see a lot of misinformation and a lot of questions. Some of them were good, being asked by Jews in the diaspora that don't know what's going on here. A lot of these left people have never been to Israel, have never been to Judea or Samaria. Some of them might not know that Palestinians have a Jordanian passport, not an Israeli one, or the fact that I am, as an Israeli citizen, I cannot enter some parts of my own country. So, I think that they are being played in many ways by these things that they see, by the content that they consume. And because as I've said earlier, it is so easy to lie to people or to mislead people. And I think that, it aligns with my next answer as to how we can connect between Israel and the diaspora, is that the approach shouldn't necessarily be an approach to attack or to defend. I think that at the end of the day, we are on the same boat, whether some people understand this or not. Obviously, we have very different kinds of Jewish groups, like the Netuei Karta that burn flags of Israel, which is a whole different topic. But so I think that answer number one, people are being played by the media, by content that they consume. They don't spend time understanding, and this is a problem. And answer number two, as to how to connect with the diaspora, I think that it's very hard for me to to talk about that since I was born and raised in Israel. I've been to the US, in fact, only once in my life. So I do think that we should hear, as if I speak on behalf of Israel, I do think that we should hear ideas from the diaspora as to how we can connect and build better bridges. Because I do hear from Israelis oftentimes that they do not understand why, for example, American Jews are criticizing Israel and that we should be united. So I do hear people who are hurt by that here in Israel. But then I do hear the other side in the US or in Canada, that people are also hurt by the way Israelis behave. So I think that certainly a bridge needs to be built and rather quickly than later. And I think that we should hear ideas from people in the diaspora, because for me as an Israeli, it may sound very easy. We're all on the same team. We all have one and only Jewish state in the world. It's okay to have different opinions. It's okay to have to criticize or to think this and that. But at the end of the day, I think that it is to an extent, because we are under attack. So we should be united. So I think that the best way to commute these differences or the different ideas is to hear from people who live in the diaspora and to hear from them.
Here's another question to whoever will answer that. We read and hear a lot about the problems facing Israel, even by pro-Israelis, what the enemy does and what the problems are, but very few pro-Israelis discuss or bring the question about how to assert the rights, how to bring the facts to the audiences, rather than constantly deal with the problems and what is being done against the Jews.
Well, if I may, I think it's important to emphasize both. I think you have, one of the things that's important that a lot of people aren't aware of is that the Palestinian Authority pays terrorists, hundreds of millions of dollars a year to murder Jews, and constantly glorifies the terrorists. And I think that's something very important to emphasize when people start talking about human rights. I think also we don't want to talk about Palestinian narrative versus Israeli narrative. We talk about we have the truth and they have propaganda and lies. And the key propaganda lie is this idea of occupation. So I think I agree that we have to have stories and so on. I agree that we need to. There's a lot that we need to do, that we sort of have to have an all of the above approach, but emphasizing the facts is something that we have to constantly do, because we constantly hear occupation, and we have to specifically and repeatedly emphasize the facts that we have the legal international right to this land under binding international law. Sometimes it's as easy as saying that, and then they can start finding out more. But we don't. That phrase should be used over and over again, and we should get the facts out about that. When people hear occupation all day, you don't hear, if you respond to this lie of occupation by saying, oh, well, we do all these great things in the world and we give seeds to Africa, and we've brought irrigation all over the world and medical supplies, and we have a great culture, people are going to respond and say, but you stole the land, you're occupiers. It doesn't answer it. We have to answer that directly and constantly. And I've seen many people change their views because of that. And we worry about the left. A lot of people on the left have never even heard the truth. Some of them don't want to listen, but some of them change when you actually drum the truth into them. And that's something that we have to do over and over again. This is our lawful land. These are our rights. given to us in international law, as well as history and the Bible and every other statement. And look what we're dealing with. We're dealing with an entity, Hamas, whose charter calls for murdering every Jew, and we have a Palestinian state on the other side that is competing with Hamas. In fact, they've made statements, we've killed more Jews than Hamas. Let's point out those facts. It's very important to point out both. We need an all of the above approach, but don't forget that the key myth is this occupation myth, so we have to emphasize our rights.
Correct. Before we go to closing, I would like to ask a personal question on behalf of CILR. In 2020, San Remo's 100th anniversary, an appeal was made to Netanyahu, then Prime Minister of Israel, to declare Yom San Remo a national holiday. The appeal was videotaped and supported by many hundreds of CILR's followers and hailed also by legal experts. Furthermore, a bill was introduced in the Knesset by MK Uzi Dayan, but has not received approval due to the repeated changes of the government. And here is the question: can it be expected that the present government will declare Yom San Remo a national holiday, thus giving official recognition to Israel's legal rights to the land?
Sorry.
Anybody?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of it.
This is a question to anybody, and I would like to hear the panelists, if you would support this, if you're going to further fight for this declaration of the holiday, how many of you will support it?
I would be personally very happy to support it. And at the World Zionist Congress, prior to the year when the San Remo Declaration came up, we passed a resolution about having worldwide education about San Remo, and any way that we can help with that, I would be very happy to help. And I'm sure. Well,
thank you so much. Can I hear from other panelists?
I'd like to make a point on the propaganda, on the public diplomacy. I think since 1993, Israel does not have any public diplomacy. After the Oslo Accords, we thought that the world is going to hug us and kiss us and leave us alone. But this did not happen. In fact, the Israeli budget on public diplomacy is almost nil. And this is the problem that is arising every year, when the Arabs are putting so much money in it, and they are trying to convince people, brainwash them, and put them in a situation where they would defame Israel every 24/7. Israel is doing nothing to counter that. That's the main problem. I think I was in New York, and I met the general consul there, and I said, "Tell me, what's the Israeli budget for public diplomacy per year?" And he said, $10 million. $10 million is hardly something that you pay in a half packed factory. So this is our main problem. Now, the Jews in America are getting influenced by the propaganda, by the Arab propaganda that is everywhere. And this is the problem. We have to counter that. One of the things that we can do is to bring the Jewish students to our side, is to counter this propaganda.
Professor Zion, if I may turn your attention to the question, which is, would you support calling on the government to name Yom San Remo a national holiday?
Definitely.
Okay.
I think the San Remo resolution divided the Middle East and gave Israel the legitimacy to be in this area. And you cannot actually attack Israel, attack the Jewish nation in Palestine without attacking the Iraqis and the Syrians and the Lebanese, who at the same time, the same day, and in the same document received their independence and our homeland.
Thank you, Professor Zion. May I hear from the other panelists, please?
Absolutely. I think that this is a very important mission, as the San Remo played an important role in what we have today, the one and only Jewish state.
And I would add that I believe that not a lot of students even know what's the San Remo conference or what even happened there. So this is our job to teach those students, because if our students don't know what give us the legitimacy to be where we at, we are in a deep hole. So it's important we go, we teach our students about it. And if someone raises a question of like, hey, do you know what the San Remo conference? It shouldn't be a problem to respond to it, because they know what it is and they know how to defend or even attack the people that don't give Israel legitimacy.
So in other words, would you support declaring Yom San Remo a national holiday, which is a reverse, going in reverse, actually not explaining San Remo, but automatically it would raise the question, what is it about? Why is Yom San Remo important? I think we have to conclude the questions now, and I call on Irving to make the closing remarks. Irving? Irving?
Yes, well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for this important webinar on the occasion of the anniversary of the Mandate for Palestine. And as we noted here with Goldie's last question about Yom San Remo, if we declare, if the state of Israel declares Yom San Remo, that will force the discussion and lead people to understand more about the legal rights. Thank you, Abraham and Liz and Ilan and Hananya, and our four panelists, and of course Goldie and Agnes, who have worked tirelessly to make this webinar a success. We look forward to seeing you all again in the near future as we continue to defend Zionism and the indigenous rights of the Jewish people to a homeland in the state of Israel. Thank you so much. All the best. Am Yisrael Chai.
We hope to see everyone when we celebrate the Balfour Declaration in November, which is going to be our next lecture, and you're all invited to attend. We thank you all the attendants, and we look forward to going forward. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.